EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in, Eagles fans, Birds 365 fans. How you guys doing this morning? Thursday, June 20th edition of Birds 365. Got a good show for you planned, a lot to talk about. Programming reminder, Dan Silio's National Football Show will be coming up right after the show today. So 10 to 12, we got 4 straight hours of power on JAKIB Sports for you this morning. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Thursday morning?
Doing well. Yeah, you got a busy day today, Zander.
Yeah, I got a busy day. I'm in a wedding. I got big sills coming up next, so we got a lot going on here in these neck of the woods. I hope everybody has a nice day. Stays relatively cool. I think it's supposed to be 90 or 95 degrees outside.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a heat wave, and it's only going up. It's going to be 97, 98 in a couple of days. So, yeah, everybody stay cool if you're local. But we have a lot of non-local people as well. So.
Yep, tons of non-local people. If you guys are in the chat, drop where you guys are watching from. I always like to read the comments and see, where everybody's watching from. Johnny Mac, we do have a big international crowd, as well as, you know how Eagles Nation is. They really are all over the country. They are not just a Philly.
Yeah, I
mean, they're mostly Philly, but there is a lot of Eagles fans out there, all throughout the country and really all throughout the world. As I'm learning since I've been working on JAKIB Sports and building this channel up. There's Tyler Braswell, Oklahoma. Boom. First one there.
Yeah, I mean, I say it all the time when I'm traveling, like no matter where I am, somebody listens to Birds 365. And a lot of times it's people, the Eagles fans travel well as well. So some of them are traveling in, but usually it's people that live there. And I'm like, Arizona was crazy. I tell that story all the time. My Uber driver, right? It was just random listening to the show. So it's always fun. People are always coming up to me, say hello at hotels and things like that. So yeah, passionate fan base, no question about that.
Yeah, pretty awesome stuff. Lansdale, ironic, that's where my cousin who's getting married today is from. So Lansdale, we got Oklahoma, Newark, Delaware. Good morning from Florida. What's going on, Ryan Garrison? I'm sure it's hot down there in Florida. Perth Amboy, New Jersey. Here's Hot Springs, Arkansas, Lancaster, PA, Charleston, South Carolina, Danville. Awesome stuff. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate you all for being here this morning. Coming up in hour number 1, we'll have John Stolness, who will join us. So we'll talk to him, get his take on the latest in the Eagle land, what he thinks of the upcoming season, the comments from Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni. We'll talk about all that. And then in hour number 2, we have an open hour. So I'm going to try and, if the questions are good, I will take some questions for Johnny Mac in hour number 2 today. So if anything's been on your mind that you guys want to ask Johnny Mac and you're here on the live stream, think about them, drop them in the comments. Any super chats will go right to the top, and we will do that. But we will also preview a couple of our opponents early in the year. So a lot of good things planned for today's show. And then, as I mentioned, coming right out of the show today, we'll have National Football Show from 10 to 12, an abbreviated National Football Show, but coming right up next. Johnny Mac, I want to open the show today talking about our one first round pick, Quinyon Mitchell, and our second round pick in Cooper DeJean. Let's get into Quinyon Mitchell. How you feeling about Quinyon Mitchell coming out of the spring? I know we haven't seen much, so I don't want to make too much of what we saw from him, but it's always good to see, especially the first round picks, because it's like you can see the athleticism, the talent, the raw stuff on display. What's your thoughts right now on Quinyon Mitchell as we prepare coming out of the spring for training camp?
Yeah, I think it was pretty good. I mean, we always try to put as many caveats on spring work as possible, but there's sometimes I think you can get more negatives than positive, if that makes sense. If somebody shows up and you can ascertain pretty quickly, okay, this guy's not ready. And you didn't get that feeling at all with Quinyon Mitchell. Certainly looked the part, certainly was competent, certainly. And remember, he's out there against some pretty good receivers when he's getting, by the end of minicamp, he was getting some first-team reps. So some pretty good receivers, to say the least. And he didn't look overwhelmed. So I think it was all positive from the standpoint. Cooper as well, from that standpoint. And I think, the Eagles want to get him on the field as quickly as possible. I think there's a nice little luxury, even more so for Quinyon than maybe Cooper, because you have Isaiah Rodgers, and he showed up and didn't look like he missed a beat over his 500+ day layoff. And then you have Kaylee Ringo, who I think might be a starting corner in this league anyway. Is certainly long-term from a long-term perspective. So, if that comes to fruition in training camp and guys like that step up and you feel comfortable, you can have that little bit more of a ramp-up period for somebody like Quinyon Mitchell. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either. But I do think he's going to be involved pretty much from day one. I'm not going to say he's going to be a day one starter. I think the Eagles are working toward that. I think they're hoping for it. But, if Ringo Rodgers plays well, you can slow that down. So there's no issues with that. But I do think he's going to be on the field, and you kind of saw big with that dime package.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes I have to catch myself. The game is rapidly changing so dramatically. And I say all the time, and I do believe that if Sean Desai did that, he would have gotten a lot of crap. I do
We'll
believe.
probably still be talking about it a month out of a month removed. Yeah.
But we always talk. You got to have two linebackers. No, you don't. Not anymore. Not unless somebody takes advantage and ships offensive football, and they try to take advantage of it. And that really hasn't come to fruition. And we're getting closer and closer to that idea of positionless football in the back seven, where guys are just moving around and you're trying to match up, and it's becoming like the NBA, where old school NBA fans know you had a center and a power forward and a small forward and a point guard and a shooting guard. No more. Guys move seamlessly from spot to spot. And it's not to that degree, I would say, yet. But there are guys, and it's funny. I always bring up Josh Metellus. He's one of my favorite players because of how versatile he is. So, and it happened to pop up this week where somebody put all the positions he played last year: strong safety, free safety, left cornerback, right cornerback, slot cornerback, left inside linebacker, right inside linebacker, middle linebacker, edge rusher, right defensive end, left defensive tackle. That's one guy. And he played more snaps than anybody else in the entire NFL defensively. Now, there's very few of those level of people, but you can go back to Malcolm Jenkins here. I think there's a lot of those guys now who move around and play different positions. And the Eagles are going to find ways to get both of them, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, on the field. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that pretty early in the season.
You think Quinyon Mitchell could play some slot cornerback as well? I know they teased him there. I mean, obviously, based on what you just said, he could play anywhere, basically. But I mean, I don't
want to put that. No, I don't. I'm just talking about the most versatile player in the NFL, and I'm saying not even that the Eagles are trying to work towards that, but when you see them look, so essentially when he was in that dime package, again, it's all a labeling system, really. But if you were going to label it and you're just looking on the field, he's playing linebacker in that position. Not really a linebacker. Again, it's just a label. But what you're trying to do is get more coverage people on the field. And they're going to try to get as many coverage people on the field if they can get away with it. And part of getting away with it is just the nature of the other team not taking advantage of it and allowing you to get away with it. And if they do that and they continue to do that, and that's most of the NFL, then you can get away with it. So why not take advantage of it and get an extra coverage player on the field?
Yeah, this is where I wonder, and just based on your breakdown and then thinking about the players on the roster, this is where I know everybody didn't like your idea, which wasn't a report, it wasn't a speculation, it was simply an idea. If Howie feels like he has enough assets there or too many assets there, maybe trading one of these young guys, because it does look like there's like one odd man out, right? Like if Keely or Isaiah play up and they get that second outside cornerback spot, maybe you work Quinyon and Cooper into the slot, but you also have one man out there where one of them is going to have to play the slot. You also have Avonte Maddox. You have a bunch of other, potential guys that could fill those roles. It does look like they might be one guy, maybe two deep, where if you want to get Quinyon and Cooper on the field in their rookie years, it might be hard to do with the setup right now. Do you think there's a chance both of them get on the field for consistent reps this year?
Yeah, I do. I think they're working towards that. Ironically, I think it's probably more likely that Cooper gets on the field early if you were going to put a percentage on it, just because they have more at outside corner than
Right.
inside corner. And what they do is really Avonte Maddox, who has this significant injury history. Um, and I don't want to dismiss Tyler Hall because he looked pretty good in minicamp as well, but I don't think he's uh, generating as much um, hype as Ringo or Rogers. So I think they certainly look more equipped than they were last year when the slot position was a revolving door after Avonte got hurt, and probably the biggest contributor to that colossal drop from number 1 in pass defense to number 31. It's probably the slot position, and they just couldn't fix it. So now they have a bunch of other options, and the contingencies are obviously better. But I don't look at Tyler Hall in the same way I look at Isaiah Rogers and Kaylee Ringo. So I think the slot is probably less, not probably, less depth than the outside corner right now, and both are projections, let's be honest as well, but the projections look more talented, more ready to play outside than inside. um so that's why I think, and I think Cooper would be the guy in that particular position more than Quinyon Mitchell, who I think they're focused on making a top tier outside corner, and they should be. So
Yeah, right. They definitely should be. Is there a fear with that? Like when you have a guy that you want to be an outside corner, and then you move him inside, is there a fear they form bad habits or things that don't lend to being a good outside player, and that's why they would probably try and avoid that?
well, I think it's difficult. It's not easy. They're two really different positions. I think
Yeah,
maybe people don't think about it as much. Like I talk about the difference between Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and people like that, defensive tackle. They're two different positions, but they're both called defensive tackles. But Jordan's mainly going to be the nose and the shade technique, and Jalen's mainly going to be 3 technique, 4 eye, and they're completely different positions, but they're both defensive tackles. Um, and not that there won't be some overlap. Jalen's not going to play nose tackle, but Jordan Davis will occasionally play 4 eye or something like that. But there's some overlap. Same thing with corner. There's guys that travel. There's guys who play inside and outside, not a lot, but there's some. And it's usually guys who are just tremendously gifted. Like I was talking about the versatile players who can play multiple positions and
yeah,
understand multiple positions and realize what everybody's supposed to do on every particular play. Um, So usually if you can do that, you're just really good. That's what it comes down to. And maybe Quinyon Mitchell turns into that eventually. Maybe he's traveling. And if you're a traveling corner, which Vic isn't going to use a lot of, and certainly with young corners, I don't think you're going to see that much at all this season. Plus his propensity to play mainly zone, you're not going to see a lot of it. And that's one of the issues Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard and players like that had with him in Miami, because they want to play price coverage, especially Jalen Ramsey. He wants to travel. When you get to that level, you can sort of do anything, but also you're affecting others. That's the part I think most don't understand. Slay can travel, and he has traveled many times, did it more in Detroit than he does it here, but he's traveled many times here. But you're affecting, if you're traveling, that means somebody else has to play somewhere they're not comfortable with,
Right.
and they're not as good as Darius Slay. So all of that comes into it.
John, do you think they're evaluating Cooper? Do you think they want Cooper DeJean to be an outside cornerback, or are they comfortable with him playing a slot role? And I'm talking more long-term here. I'm not talking just year one, because I'm looking at the breakdown, even in life after Slay. Slay's 34 or 33 right now. I think he might be going on 34. Keely Ringo makes this whole room interesting, because if he stayed in school another year, you could argue the Eagles would have been picking between Ringo and Mitchell. Now, that's pure speculation on my part, but I think Keely Ringo was that good of a player in college. He came out a little early and he fell to the 4th round. Eagles snagged him up. Now they have two, I think, really highly regarded young prospects on their roster that could both be long-term outside corners for this team, which would leave probably Cooper playing slot. Are they comfortable with that, or do you know if the organization wants him to be an outside guy?
Well, I know all I can say is I know the personnel department scouted him as an outside corner. So they believe he's an outside corner, first and foremost, as his primary position. He's also a tremendously versatile player, which is, part of the desire to get him as well.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, if Ringo does develop, if Quinyon does develop and they're the outside corners, then they're going to feel comfortable playing him inside. And you have 3 good corners in theory. If one of them falters, they're going to put him back at outside corner, because that they feel that's his primary position. Now he might falter as well. So, but it's nice to have all these young corners with upside. But all I can tell you is they scouted him as an outside corner. That's what he played predominantly at Iowa, but they do believe he's a very versatile player. They do believe he's got the football IQ to handle other positions, and to get him on the field quickly this year, it's going to be more of an inside player. I think that's more the logical routes. But and the second part is, the personnel staff does their work, the scouts and Howie and his group. And then they hand them off to the coaches, and the coaches decide, all right, this is the 53 I have. This is the 46 on game day I have. How do I get to the finish line on a particular Sunday or a particular game day? So, you already saw it with Zach Bond. Howie talked about him one way, and Vic got him and said, you know what? I think he's an all-ball linebacker, and he's playing all-ball linebacker. It's not why Howie brought him in. He said he brought him in as a more of an edge guy. But once you hand him off to the coaching staff,
All right,
then it's up to the coaching staff and say, how they want to use him.
I'll tell you what, it feels good though to and I know you're a reporter. I know you're not. You don't view it like I view it, but from a fan's perspective, even just trying to be objective as I sit here and host the show, as I try and be as much as I can every day, there's a lot of optimism on this young core. I mean, I know they're all not proven players yet, but it feels good to have a lot of young, potential guys that can be good cornerbacks in this league for a long time. So it'll be interesting to see how the position plays out. High expectations, obviously, for Cooper and Quinyon coming into year one, but also a good room they're playing in. And my favorite part about this, John, is what better way to learn how to be an NFL cornerback than to go up against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in practice every day?
Yeah, and don't underestimate Darius Slay. That's the one thing about Slay and AJ. And AJ was talking about tight end universities going on again in Nashville this week, and wide receivers don't really have anything like that.
Yeah, I saw him put that tweet out. He wants to do something.
Yeah, DBs, that Slade's been pushing that for the DBs for years. These are veteran players, and not all veteran players who enjoy helping younger players, and that shouldn't be underlooked because that's just not the case everywhere with every star player.
Yeah, right. And nor is he expected to do it. It's not what he's paid to do. It's not what he's here for. But some guys do take on that role, so it is a blessing and a good thing that we have Darius Slay here. Obviously, a guy who's played cornerback at a very high level for a long time. So good stuff there, and a lot of young talent in that cornerback room. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Let's get to our first commercial break. Before I do that, I want to welcome and thank everybody for being here this morning. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show. A lot of good comments, Johnny Mac, on where people are from. Virginia, Kansas City. We got a Kansas City guy in here. So good stuff. A lot of people from all over the world, really, in here watching the show. So we appreciate that very much. Coming up next, we'll have John Stolness from Bleeding Green Nation. Stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Thursday edition of Birds 365, joined now by a show favorite, John Stolness. What's going on, John? How you doing today?
I'm good, boys. How are you?
Good to see you, John. Doing well. People are going to get mad because they don't want us to talk to us. The evil media has spoken again. This time, I got to give a hat tip to our buddy Howard Eskin. But so first, I want your definition of what Carson Wentzing someone is, because I don't believe the Eagles. Even I said it yesterday on the show. I don't think the Eagles Carson Wentz. I think they were going to run it back, and he was like, "Nah, I'm done with this organization." Basically,
Yeah, I didn't realize he'd become a verb. That was news to me when Howard said that the other day. I think so. What I took that to mean was that the Eagles, if Jalen Hurts struggles, or if there's some kind of, I don't know, personality conflict, or there's some locker room, whatever it happens to be, that the Eagles, it sounds like, would be willing to eat the money, eat a contract like they did with Carson Wentz in order to move on from a quarterback situation that they feel wasn't working. Now, like you said, they weren't really ready to move on from Carson Wentz. Carson kind of dictated that a lot himself. And so that kind of forced their hand, but they ended up eating the money. But I think that more just means that the Eagles are not locking themselves into Jalen Hurts necessarily just because he has this long-term contract, because he signed this franchise quarterback deal, that they figured it out once before by trading away Carson Wentz and eating all of that money, and actually made the playoffs doing it with a huge cap number on their books, that they feel that they could probably do it again. Now, I don't know if you want to make that a pattern. I don't know if that's necessarily, the way you want to go about it. That's certainly not ideal team building by any stretch of the imagination. And there are certainly big differences between the two. It's a little disconcerting that the year after signing a big money deal, both Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts took a step back in those years. Now, Carson was dealing with injuries, obviously, and Jalen Hurts, to me, sure looked like he was dealing with something last year, but there's been no surgery. There's been no announcement. It just, it was not a bad year by Jalen Hurts last year, but certainly not up to his 2022 standards. And then there's just been some kind of weird comments from Jalen Hurts with Nick Sirianni and stuff this offseason that have given people pause too. So you just factor all those things in. I just think it means, like, if we have to, we'll eat the money and we'll move on to a different possibility.
I like your explanation. I think you have given the best explanation. So I give you a gold star there, John. I like that. Because you might be right. It might be as simple as they're willing to eat a lot of money if they have to eat a lot of money. Not that they want to, but right. They're willing to. And I think anybody in the NFL, if you have two bad seasons in a row, that's where I kind of look at it. If you have anybody, if Patrick Mahomes, it's not going to happen, has two crappy seasons in a row, there'll be a lot of pressure on him in year 3. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to happen here with Jalen Hurts, but I like that explanation. Well done, John Stoltz.
I'd like to present too potentially an alternate viewpoint where I wonder if there's a little bit of a show of power here from the front office to try and knock Jalen in line, if that makes sense. Like, Jalen goes out and says some stuff about the coaches. By the way, I think this was all media speculation. It was a media story until the Eagles come out. It wasn't the Eagles directly, but Jeff McMullen comes out and says higher ups are upset with Jalen Hurts. And then Howard Eskin, a guy that really is sort of a mouthpiece for the Eagles. He has a Super Bowl ring. This is a guy that's entrenched in the organization, comes out and kind of dismisses the comments from Jalen Hurts as well, says he's going to get Carson Wentz. I'm wondering if there's kind of a back end here where it's like the front office likes their power. Jalen kind of made them look bad in what the decision they made with Nick Sirianni. Could you view it like that, where it's like, hey, Jalen, you better stop making us look bad and say what we need you to say, or else we're going to move on if we have to.
Look, guys, I live near Washington, D.C. I work in Washington, D.C. I'm familiar with how the political game works. And this is politics just in a local sports level. It's 100%, I think, what's happening here. Because I'm not one of those people who heard the Jalen Hurts comments about Nick Sirianni and thought, oh, my gosh, this is a big problem. This is a huge issue. What is he doing? I think it got conflated to the point on sports talk radio where it got a little bit out of control. But I also don't think it's nothing. There certainly seems to be, and even if you just look at these guys' personalities, Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, they're very different people, very, very different ways of going about things. Like, Nick Sirianni is kind of a brash guy. He's a loud talker. He likes to stir things up. He likes to play the villain. And Jalen Hurts is kind of one of those head down, quiet, grinded out, saying all the right things, the platitudes and all that kind of stuff, and kind of wants to lead by example. I can imagine, and I'm not in the locker room, but it would seem to me that there certainly would be a difference in personalities that could be an issue. And I really do think Jalen Hurts went out of his way in that news conference not to pay his head coach a compliment, which was just bizarre to me. It seemed like he was almost trying to create something where nothing was there. It was a softball question. And so I can understand why the front office was upset, because it sure seemed to me like the quarterback was throwing his head coach under the bus a little bit. And that's going to have an effect in the locker room, because these players, they look at Jalen Hurts as a leader and they look at Nick Sirianni as a leader. This is part of the danger in bringing Nick Sirianni back for another year, when you've swapped out both of the positional coaches and you've basically set it up so that if the Eagles offense does well, it's because of Kellen Moore. And if the Eagles fail, it's because of Nick Sirianni staying for another year. And Jalen Hurts is out here really refusing to get his head coaches back. Now, is that a big deal? I don't know, but the front office seems to think it is. And Zander, I think 100% you're right. I think this is their way of publicly slapping Jalen Hurts on the wrist and saying, what are you doing? Stop. You are not the golden goose here. You are not ensconced here forever just because you signed that contract.
Yeah, get on board. I think in a lot of ways, John, it's just common sense. I mean, what Jeff reported is they were highly disappointed. They were disappointed because of the timing. You're doing it on the cusp of the 6-week off period, 7 weeks off, and you're in Philadelphia. It's like, dude, you know what Philadelphia's like.
Yeah.
And people are going to run. You give them a baton and people are going to run in 17 different directions if you don't give them a clear finish line. Right. So what he did is he created unneeded speculation. That's the quote I got from the Eagle. Unneeded speculation. Unnecessary. I'm sorry. Yeah. Unnecessary speculation. It was a layup. So why wouldn't they be disappointed?
Yeah.
That's how I kind of look at it.
And Jalen is media savvy. He has always been the guy who's everything he says is measured. He knows what to say. He knows what the right thing to say is in every situation. All he had to say was, "Yeah, Nick's been great. He's been really great. It's really
so
good."
Easy, John.
One sentence.
Yeah.
And but that's what I mean. Like, he went out of his way to word salad his way into not complimenting Nick Sirianni, playing dumb like he didn't kind of understand the question. It didn't make any sense for the moment, and I can understand why the front office is not happy about it.
Yeah. I wonder if Jalen Hurts is showing them that he doesn't like the way they're doing things, maybe, and that was part of the reason. I mean, look, it's just press conference comment in June and May, so I don't want to make too much of it. But as BLG said on the show yesterday, John, and I love what he said, it's more than nothing,
right? But
it's less than everything, right? And as you said, Jalen's very intentional. And I wonder if part of it is his way of showing, maybe can't call it a slap on the wrist because he's not the one with all the power, but maybe it's him saying, you guys brought back this coach we don't believe in, I don't believe in, and I'm not happy about it, and I'm going to show you. You paid me $55 million. I want to coach. Maybe it's not that. I'm just speculating, obviously, at this point, but it is interesting to think about for sure.
Yeah, and the thing that's really disappointing is that really the vibes took a big hit when he said that too. Just the vibes around the team. There's just that it's unneeded negativity as they're going into this extended break now where we don't have anything else to talk about. I mean, this happened 3 weeks ago and we're still talking about it. Like, it's just, it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth because it was such an easy
upset. We're still talking about it. But I mean, what are you supposed to do? You can't stick your head in the sand either.
Right. Well, and a relationship between a quarterback and the head coach is an important one. It's really, I mean, there have been instances, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were not best of friends, but they at least, I think, respected each other if they didn't like each other.
Right.
If your head coach and your quarterback are not on the same page, if there's a lack of respect that the head quarterback has to the head coach, and again, speculating, we don't know that this is the case, that will affect the play on the field, and it's going to split the locker room.
Yeah, you don't have to like each other, but you have to at least feel like the other person can help you achieve the ultimate goal. And Tom obviously always had that with Bill Belichick, whether they liked each other or not. The relationship kind of soured toward the end. So I don't really care if they like each other. But with this, I'm kind of getting the vibe. Jalen doesn't feel like he can go the distance with Nick Sirianni, even though
if that's the case, that's nuts. I mean,
I agree.
They didn't win the Super Bowl, but they were on the cusp of beating a dynastic team. Is that a word? I'm making it a word.
I like it.
A dynastic team. They outplayed them. They were the better team on the football field. If they didn't have a couple defensive mistakes, I'm not going to complain about officials, but everybody can complain about officials. You know, they made a mistake probably letting Aaron Cepas punt in that game coming off the injury that he had. They probably should have stuck with Brett Kern. Bunch of different mistakes. Jalen Hurts was the best player on the field. He was better than the best player in the NFL. I'm not saying he's better, but he was better on that day than Patrick Mahomes. I truly believe that. They're right there. You've already proven you can go the distance. Did they go the distance? No, but that doesn't mean you weren't there on the cusp. So if he believes he can't go the distance, what you just did it. Essentially.
But isn't it fair to speculate that, John? I mean, I agree with you. Like, I think it would be foolish to think you couldn't. I think Nick did a great job in 2022. But isn't it fair to speculate that with the way that Jalen has answered this and has gone about his business with this?
I guess I take it more of, and I'll throw it at both you guys, because what he did get out on purpose, because I asked him the question, was the 95% thing. And I didn't ask him about the offense, but he wanted it out there. So that I asked him, I think I asked him about, last time we talked to him, he talked about being a sponge. And I essentially asked him, have you moved past that? Are you now being more vocal with the offense and what you like and sort of morphing around what you do well? And he took it the way he wanted to, because as you point out, John, he's very intentional usually. Mm-hmm. And he wanted it out there that this is a completely new offense, 95% new offense. And maybe that's why they were struggling this spring. And he's probably right, because there is going to be some growing pains with that kind of stuff. So I think he was more just frustrated about the whole system. And maybe that's if there is any anger, maybe it's about not continuity. You know, he's close with Brian Johnson, or he was. Yeah. Maybe he's not. You're down in DC. Maybe you can uncover that for us, John.
Yeah,
because Brian's down there. Brian's down there.
Yeah.
But maybe it's got to do with that. I don't know, but I do know they were really close to winning a Super Bowl with this group, and Nick Sirianni is the head coach. So if you think they can't do it, were you watching a couple of years ago?
Yeah, and the thing about the 95%, what that also said to me was Jalen trying to make sure that everyone knew that this is Kellen Moore's offense, right? That was not. It's like if basically 5% of Nick Sirianni's offense is left over from last year moving into this year, he's making it clear to everyone also that this is a brand new offense. Now, if the offense flounders, then perhaps you can throw the lion's share of the blame at Kellen Moore and maybe Nick Sirianni. He doesn't survive it, obviously, but Kellen Moore certainly would get fitted with goat horns as well. But if the offense succeeds, you will. It will you just know it's going to play. Kellen Moore saved the offense, right? But I think the Jalen Hurts comments about the offense and the reason they've looked a little bit sluggish in the spring, and the fact that it is a new offense that they're putting in, I think that's all valid, and I think that's a good excuse, a good reason for why the quarterback and the rest of the offense may not have looked as great here during the offseason mini camps. But again, I just come back to the vibes that this team had. Awful vibes at the end of last year. And it was the locker room kind of started to come apart, and you're hoping that some of those things would heal this offseason. And the quarterback, who is the leader of the team, needs to be doing his part to make sure that you get this locker room back together, that everybody's got to be rowing in the same direction. And it just doesn't feel like that's happening right now. I hope that changes once training camp rolls around and people start to get on the same page.
I think it will, is because they always say winning cures everything. I think if this team can get off and have some wins, I think it will cure all. John, I want to move on and ask about our first round draft pick this year, Quinyon Mitchell. What are your realistic expectations for Quinyon going into year one? It seems to be now a loaded cornerback room, something we haven't been able to say in Philly for a while. A lot of guys, a lot of young guys, a lot of potential players with upside. How do you see it breaking out for Quinyon Mitchell in year one?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily need to see him start. I would like to see him get a significant number of snaps as like the backup to either Darius Slay, or if it's Keely Ringo, or I don't think they're going to bring James Bradbury back at this point. But if Bradbury comes back, but I don't think he needs to start. I think if he blows everybody away in training camp, great. Throw him, have him as your starter. He can have the kind of impact that Lito Shepherd had in his first season. The Eagles have done a good job of drafting cornerbacks in recent years, really before under the Andy Reid head coaching tenure, and getting them acclimated pretty quickly. So it's possible. And he seems to be a really talented kid. I'm very excited about him, and he has the benefit of having a loaded cornerback room where it doesn't really, I don't think he doesn't have to be a savior back there. But the rotation will be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how many snaps he gets. I think that this coaching staff recognizes that in recent years, they haven't gotten their rookies enough snaps. Like Nolan Smith last year didn't play nearly enough. Nakobe Dean didn't play nearly enough in his first season in 2022, and they went to the Super Bowl, and that was understandable. You're going to the Super Bowl. You've got TJ Edwards, you've got Kaiser White. You've got a decent linebacking group right there, but it cost him in his second year because when he did play, he didn't look ready. And so I think they want to work Quinyon Mitchell into more defensive snaps in his rookie season than other rookies have gotten in their rookie seasons. And it's not like he's playing defensive tackle where he's going to be grinding every week against other big bodies. He's an athletic kid. He's not going to be asked to cover a number one wide receiver every week. So I think if he can play 25-30% of the snaps this year as a backup outside corner, I think that's great. It's a good learning experience for him. And then I think you ideally want him to slide in as a starter in 2025.
Yep.
Last year, to take sort of Quinyon expanded to the whole defense and the changeover to Vic Fangio, I think everybody's optimistic that Vic is going to get this unit back on the right track. And I think it's kind of hard for him not to be honest, because they fell from number 2 to number 26. They fell from the number 1 ranked pass defense to number 31. What is, when you think about that turn, that 180, that's a 180 in 1 year. Can they do it the opposite way?
Yeah, I mean, they can. And I think it's going to come from in 2022. The reason why the pass defense was so great was because of the insane pressure the defensive line put on opposing quarterbacks. And it really made life easier for the secondary because quarterbacks just didn't have a whole lot of time to throw. I'm a little less optimistic that the defensive line is going to generate the kind of pressure that we're looking for. If Nolan Smith does jump up and he plays more and he's productive, then that takes the pressure off of Josh Sweat to play as many snaps as he did last year. And then you hope Josh Sweat is a little bit more productive, especially in the second half of the season. I'm still nervous about the swap out of Hassan Reddick and Bryce Huff at the other edge spot. And I don't know how much Brandon Graham has left in the tank. And they're going to miss Fletcher Cox. He was really good last year in the middle. And so you need these young guys. It's these Bulldogs that you drafted. You need them to play like Bulldogs. You need Jalen Carter. You need Jordan Davis. Even Nakobe Dean, you need to get him going. So, but I think a lot of the defensive work is going to come from this very deep secondary where they're so much better there this year than they were a year ago. So I don't know if the pass defense can jump back up to number 1 or number 2, but I think they can be a top 10 pass defense for sure. And I think that's good enough. If they can get back into the top 10, they will win a lot of football games because I do think the offense will score this year. The offense until the latter part of the year was still very good last season for the Eagles. So I think the defensive numbers will be driven by the secondary in 2024 if they're good. 2022 is more the defensive line. I hope I'm wrong about the Huff and Hassan Reddick swap, but we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, one of the big stories there for me, and I think it's been somewhat underrated or underestimated to this point, and you would never think this with a Hall of Fame player like Fletcher Cox. It's a credit to Howie Roseman for having the contingency plan and the replacement plan there. But I think that's a big loss, not only because of the level of play, but also the amount of snaps. I mean, he took 700 snaps this year. I told John yesterday, I feel better about Jalen Carter as a young player than any other young player on the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he is going to be a great player. But that's a lot of snaps. Somebody's got to make up for all those snaps. I mean, I think Milton's going to have obviously a much bigger role this year, but I'm concerned that they don't have the depth there to make up for that type of loss in snaps and production. What do you make of the defensive line depth room?
Yeah, I still think they need to add another body, and I think you're right. I think they need to add it to. I think they need another body in the middle. Guys get released in training camp. There could be some guys that shake loose. I never get worried really about shortcomings at this time of year because the teams are mostly complete. But as you go through training camp, guys will get cut. And so there's the possibility that somebody could be added. You could make a trade as you're getting closer to the season. But I would feel more comfortable if they had at least one other body there in the middle. I think on the edge they're okay. Especially it'll be interesting to see how they use Zach Bond this year. It sounds like he's going to be playing mostly on the inside at linebacker, but you can put him at edge. That's what he did with New Orleans the last couple of years. So you have another potential guy there to give you some pressure off the side. But they're a little bit thin on the defensive line. And it's really funny because 2 years ago, or even was last year, you looked at the defensive tackle depth chart. It was like, man, they've got so many bodies they can throw at people, but they just got worn down as the year went along. And so I really hope and I really think that both Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, now that they've had a full 18, Jordan Davis now had two 17-game seasons under his belt, now starts to figure it out and starts to at least do what he was asked to do when he got here, which is provide good run defense. And if he can give you something rushing the passer, that's great. One more guy would be great. And somebody will become available as the year goes on.
Yeah. And how he's been
Kirby Smart was, go ahead, Zander. Sorry.
No, I was just saying the last couple of years, Howie has added a lot of players late in the offseason. I remember, John, we did a football 24/7 with, a couple guys that they signed late in training camp the last couple of years.
They're going to always. There's always one or two guys. It might be somebody on waivers. It might be a trade.
Yeah.
CJ Gardner-Johnson a couple of years ago was a sort of cut down trade that really worked out well. You don't expect something like that, but you never know. And I think there's always a player or two added to the mix when you see maybe we're not as good as we thought at a particular position. So I'll take it there. I'll take it there with you, John. Where would you say you're most comfortable with the depth on this team versus least comfortable with the depth on this team?
I think right now, I think cornerback is probably amazingly. They did so much work this offseason to improve the cornerback. That's what happens when you put that many resources into it in one offseason. You really do help yourself. So I think cornerback is the easy answer there. And I think if Tyler Steen and if Cam Jurgens acclimate themselves well to their new positions, then I think they have some decent depth along the offensive line as well. They could, they're not loaded there like they used to be. But Mekhi Becton seems like he's a guy that Jeff Stoutland can work with. I think. Who am I forgetting about? Matt Hennessy. I know Matt Hennessy hasn't been getting a whole lot of run with like first and second team guys, but they added him this offseason, and he's a guy with a lot of experience, so they can kind of move him around a little bit too. It's there's they can always probably add somebody as the summer goes along.
And they added Max Sharping, who's got a lot of experience. That was one that raised my eyebrows. I'm like, what does that mean when you bring in? Because Max has started, I don't know, like 38 NFL games. So he's played quite a bit. And I'm like, does that mean Hennessy's not healthy? Does it mean you're not happy with Tyler Steen? What does it mean? I haven't figured that one out yet. But he has played a lot. So throw Max Sharping into that list as well, I would say. I don't know. Wide receiver concerns me. Not at the top, obviously, but God forbid something happens to AJ. Even a week, you saw it last year when you lost AJ Brown for the playoff game, how disastrous it was. Even a week or two without AJ and Devontae, I'm not comfortable with wide receiver, and obviously I don't know how you could be comfortable with linebacker. I'm not comfortable with the starters, so I can't necessarily be comfortable with the depth. But overall, John, And at John Stolness, make sure you follow John on X, Twitter. Rita McBleedingGreenNation.com does a tremendous job. Also, the tremendous, I got to give the Phillies podcast a plug. You're up for
thank you.
some kind of award. I'm trying to pull it up.
Oh, yeah. It was for
Best
last year.
Yeah. Is that going on or not?
No. We made the finals.
Okay.
We didn't win the thing, but I keep it up there just for my own ego. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Well, it caught my eye, so it worked. All right. So it's working for you. But
thank you.
Best baseball podcast, it was up for hitting season, so it's still great. So make sure you listen to that if you're a Phillies fan. But Howie's been getting a lot of love, John, in the fact that 33rd team came out this week, said the Eagles had the second best roster in football. Pro Football Focus had them at number 3. Is that sort of Howie reputation? Combination of both?
It's probably a combination of both. I always answer with the middle ground. That's just kind of my default setting. No, I think when you look at the quarterback, I think you've got a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Last year, I came into the season, I was like, I think he's the second, third best quarterback in the NFL. He took a step back, obviously, but you've still got a top 10 quarterback who has proven he can win a Super Bowl. And even though he didn't do it, he's proven he can win a Super Bowl. Saquon Barkley, your starter at running back, you've got a bell cow running back now, something they've never had before. They've got maybe the best wide receiver duo in the league. They've got one of the 5 best receiving tight ends in the league. The offensive line, I think, is kind of getting by on reputation right now, but also some confidence that Jeff Stoutland can coach those guys up. And that they'll be fine. And then along the defensive side, they've invested so many resources there. I think everybody's just assuming Jalen Carter's going to take a step forward. Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean. These guys do seem Vic Fangio coming in. I think that people think that he'll know what to do with guys like Zach Bond, with Devin White. And then they just threw so many bodies at cornerback and safety, getting GJ back. I think we don't talk about that move a lot when we're talking about the Eagles. That was a big signing to get a real safety in here who you can throw at cornerback if you need to from time to time. But getting a little bit of that swagger back on the defensive side was really important. I think along the starters, you've got one of the best rosters in the NFC, one of the best rosters in the NFL. The only issue is going to be depth, and this is probably the issue that most teams have. If you lose one of your star wide receivers, you're not going to replace him with another star. But you would like them to have more than 2 viable starting wide receivers on your roster. And Paris Campbell, I don't see him as that guy. I don't see Anaya Smith jumping into the fray and being that guy immediately. That could be another position that they look to add as the summer goes along. But what are you going to get? You know what I mean? So we'll see. But as far as the starters go, if they stay healthy, if they have a healthy season like they did in 2022, they're absolutely a Super Bowl contender.
John, considering everything that's going on this offseason, we started obviously with the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni talk. Then we just ended with them getting second or third best roster rated in the NFL. What are your expectations going into this year? How are you viewing this season? Is this I don't want to say Super
Bowl or bust? That's what it is.
How good should this team be this year, realistically?
I think realistically, I think that's what it is. This team showed us in 2022 they can get to a Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts can win a Super Bowl, and they've done nothing but add pieces. I mean, you look, when you have a roster that is generally regarded as the first, second, third best roster in the NFL. I know multiple publications have said the Eagles have had the best offseason of any team in the NFL with everything that they've added. I think you've
this week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yep. And you've brought in 2 established, successful positional coaches or coordinators in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. There's really no reason for this team not to win the division, given how stagnant the Cowboys offseason has been, given the fact that you do play in the same division as the Giants and the Commanders, and both teams, maybe one of them improves slightly, maybe they both stink again this year. But this division is there for the taking for the Eagles to go out and grab. And then around the NFC, will the 49ers take a step back? Most Super Bowl losers take a step back the next year, and the vibes are not great great in San Francisco right now with Brandon Ayuk and some of the other issues they've got going on. The Detroit Lions are obviously an ascending team. You're going to have to deal with them. The Green Bay Packers look like they're going to be better with Jordan Love looking like the real deal. I mean, there's going to be competition in the conference, but the Eagles are right there with any of those guys, and they should be among the favorites to win the NFC, and that should be our expectation for them to get back to a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, John, it's World Series or bust for you, and Super Bowl or bust.
I'm all in. I'm all in on everything, John.
not NBA championship or bust.
No.
We have stopped caring about the Sixers at this point because they have proven to time and time again that they are going to let us down. John Stolness, thanks for joining the show, man. You were great today. We appreciate it as always when you join. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
Thanks, bud.
John Stolness joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from Johnny Stolness there. I thought he had some good input, good insights on a lot.
Yeah,
of
I liked his Carson Wentz description. He gave the best Carson Wentz description. Because I took it in a different direction. I was like, well, the Eagles didn't want to move on from Carson Wentz, so I don't know. To me, they never. But John brings up a good point. If you boil it down to their willingness to move on, no matter the hurdles of the contract. Because I remember Andrew Grant and I were talking about that, like, no way they're going to take on that much dead money.
I remember that when I think it was Andrew Brandt on this show, wasn't it?
Yeah. Andrew and I, talked about it constantly because it had never happened before. So we were wrong. Jody used to take laps on us, victory laps, and deservedly so, because he went in the other direction. But nobody knows more about the business of the NFL than Andrew Brandt. And that told you how rare it was. The Eagles shattered the dead money record at the time.
It shows you how it's changing too, Johnny Mac.
Yeah.
I mean, once upon a time, teams would never take on that type of hit, but now they're more accustomed to doing it.
Yeah. So they proved in a lot of ways to the rest of the league that you can do it and you can do it. So I like this description of that. Now, still, I mean, the Eagles aren't moving on from Jalen Hurts. I mean, I can't even entertain that thought. Again, if he has a bad season this year, which I do not expect, I hope people hear that part. And then he has another bad season next year, which I do not expect. Yes, then could they potentially move on? Of course. But that's with any player. You have back-to-back terrible seasons, and that's just not going to happen.
John, what did you think of the line of thought that it was their way of slapping Jalen Hurts on the wrist, coming out with the Eskin, out?
Well, I think that, and don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of people take shots at Howard. Howard works hard. Yes, he's an employee of the Eagles. Yes, he's typically going to be very favorable to the Eagles. So it's very similar to Jalen's comments and everybody taking the baton and going 17 different directions. The Eagles aren't sitting there and betting Howard Eskin for what he says on the radio. I mean, I don't know what you think about the Eagles. I
mean, they do their best to control the narrative, and I think a guy like Howard, they wouldn't want him out there saying something that's going to continue to stir this pot in a direction that they don't like. I mean,
they might say it after the fact and say, "Dude, what are you doing?" Something like that.
Right, but they're not
sitting there and betting Howard Eskin and what he saw. I don't know. When's Howard? Howard's on like Saturday morning. He doesn't do as much, but he's always on, during the week. He just speaks off the cuff. And sometimes he says some stupid shit. Nobody's betting Howard Eskin at the NovaCare complex. He's smart enough to understand that if he says a bunch of stuff, he's going to lose his job as a sideline reporter, I assume. But nobody's sitting there putting a muzzle on Howard Eskin.
No, I know that, but I will say, I mean, he's a savvy guy. He's a savvy media guy.
From that standpoint,
I don't think he's going to put his job in jeopardy. So, I just wonder. I think it's a fair line of thought to consider. I'm not saying it's gospel. I'm not saying it's the truth. And it's just my opinion. It's something that I think you can view it and you can say, that's interesting. Because like I said, it was a big media talking point until it was validated that the front office was actually upset about it. Because it's one thing for Jalen to say something and for us to make
but that's different to me. Jeff's report is different because Jeff's a reporter. He's not speaking off the cuff. He's talking to people who have the knowledge. Now, to a certain extent, I said that's common sense. I get the same thing. It was a layup as John kind of explained. But yeah, I mean, the question, and I think, the term Jeff used was, I think, key figures were disappointed. And I wouldn't be surprised, I said, if those key figures were Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. It was just, why wouldn't they be disappointed? So that to me is the far more important part of this. And that's more of an unforced error type of situation. That's why they're disappointed. Not disappointed in a player, disappointed in an unforced error with 6 weeks of dead time, of dead air, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's the disappointment.
Let's move on, Johnny Mac. We're going to go into hour number 2. I thought John Stolness was great this morning. We had a great talk before John about Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Louis Branch just joins him. What's going on, Lou? What's up? Any good news today? No new news in Eagle Land, but I got a good couple topics coming up for hour number 2. We're going to talk about the Eagles' first couple opponents. Kind of some sleepers, guys. I mean, Packers, Falcons, Saints, Bucs. Those are your first 4 opponents for the Philadelphia Eagles. Drop in the comments what you think the record will be through those 4 games before the bye week. Packers are a sleeper ascending team. Falcons,
I don't think the Packers should be a sleeper for anybody.
Well, they're not a sleeper, so I guess you could call. I think the Saints and the Falcons are a sleeper. I think they're teams that people.
And the Bucs shouldn't be a sleeper for the Eagles for obvious reasons.
Slapped us in the playoffs last year, so there should be no sleep in there. But anyway, I mean, there's 4 solid opponents. There's no gimme game there, I guess you could say. No, I don't think there's any world beaters. There's no great Super Bowl candidates. Maybe there, Packers might be, but. I think the Eagles don't have a walk in the park. So we're going to talk about that. And then also in hour number 2, if any of you guys have a good question, a good chat, a good comment, a good super chats will go to the top for Johnny Mac. We will hit on them. I will have let John answer some of your guys' questions. We have no guest in hour number 2, so we'll be kicking all these things around. Like I said, we had a good talk about Cooper and Quinyon in the opening segment. So make sure you guys go back and check that out after the show today. So let's get our commercial break in. Hour number 2 of Bird 365 coming up next.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your greenhouse? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust, and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365. Off-season is moving right along. I think we're down to 34 or 33 days. I'm already losing track of it as it all flows together. Johnny Mac, since I started hosting the show, you used to say it all flows together. Boy, I know what you mean. More now than I did. I mean, it all flows together. I'm on National Football Show every day for about an hour. So it's all starting to flow together, just 30-something days until they're at training camp. And we're all excited for that. Johnny Mac, let's dive into our hour two topics. Let's start with game number one. Green Bay Packers.
The Green Bay Packers.
Brazil. I think it's advantage Packers here just because of the expectation coming in for the Eagles. The Packers are the ascending team. It's in Brazil. I mean, I don't know why I feel that it's advantage Packers just from the, not even any of the game stuff, just from the external factors here. But it feels like it's advantage Packers here. They're the away team. Eagles obviously lose a game at the Link to go and play in Brazil. What are you making of this first game? How are you viewing it from a 80, I think we're 78 days away now. 78 days out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Packers are a good ascending young team, very young from a skill position perspective, and they are loaded with guys who can make plays. Down the stretch last season, we talked about the Eagles and how top heavy they are at wide receiver. It just seems like the Packers come at you in ways with these young receivers who are just athletic. And, they're not A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, but they got a bunch of them. So it's sort of like, it's one of the things I've been concerned about the Eagles. They have, the best one is never out there, Christian Watson. He's always seems to be hurt. But if he's healthy, he's a guy who's really difficult to deal with. Then I had, Romeo Dobbs and Jaden Reed and even Bo Melton, who's from South Jersey here, Mays Landing kid, where I'm located. They had so many playmakers down the stretch last season. Obviously, it starts with the quarterback and Jordan Love. Somehow they've gone from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers and now Jordan Love. I'm not going to put them in that category yet, but last year looked really good as a first attempt at being a starting quarterback. They got a good tight end and Luke Musgrave. Now they brought in Josh Jacobs. It's interesting. I kind of wondered if you watch the Packers at the end of last season when they just boat raced the Cowboys, who were undefeated, by the way, at AT&T Stadium. And they just blew them off the field. I
mean, they really did. That's not an understatement at all. They throttled that team.
It was unbelievable. And the best player on the field that day was Aaron Jones. And they let Aaron Jones go. And I get it. He's 30. He was injured for most of last season. Then he came back at the end of the season, went on that incredible run. And they brought in Josh Jacobs, who's got the bigger, he had 1,600 yards a couple years ago, but he's coming off a bad season. And if there's that one thing where I look at the Packers who are very much like the Eagles in the fact that they're a good organization. They generally make good decisions. I didn't understand that swap sort of other than, because Jones has been a very good player for them for a number of years. So it seems to be their Hassan Reddick. He's getting a little bit older. They're trying to swap out, get a little bit younger, get a little bit more of a shelf life. But boy, Josh Jacobs was bad last season for anybody who wasn't paying attention in Las Vegas. He had, I don't know, 3.5 yards per carry, something like that. And it's he's had a lot of touches, excuse me. The previous year, he touched it when he had his big year. He touched it 400 times.
Well, yeah, and going back to college, I know college is a different world, but the guy he ran the ball a lot in college too. I remember he was an Alabama guy. I watched every game. I mean, the guy was a workhorse in college.
Yeah, well, that's my concern.
Right.
With what I say the same thing with Saquon here. He's already Josh Jacobs. I'm just looking it up at almost 1,500 touches, almost exactly the same as Saquon Barkley. That's how much he's touched the football over his first 5 seasons in the NFL.
Is he already through 5 years, Josh Jacobs? I thought he was. Yeah, I guess you're right because he did the option year.
Yeah. Yep. Last year was his 5th season. And remember, so here it is, 2022, 340 carries, 1,653 yards, 53 receptions on top of it. So almost 400 touches. And then the next year, last year, 3.5 yards per carry. That's how quickly it happens for running backs. So I'm not as high on Josh Jacobs as they are. We'll see how that works out for them. But overall, very good skill position talent, and defensively, they have some issues at linebacker too. Interestingly, though, they've gone a different route. Quay Walker was a first-round pick out of Georgia a couple years ago, and they drafted Edgerrin Cooper. A lot of talk about Edgerrin Cooper this year for the Eagles potentially as a second-round pick. Well, they took him in the second round. They also got Xavier McKinney, who's a player the Eagles badly wanted to add, and they went really high to get him. And they drafted a safety in the second round, Javen Bullard. So they're going to get a lot younger. Jair Alexander is one of the best cover corners in the NFL. Rashawn Gary is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Good team. Very, very good team. A lot of it depends on Jordan Love from the perspective of, I talk about all these guys. Was he too successful last year? Is he going to wrestle? Does he think he solved it? Because people are going to adjust to what he was doing well. And that's a big thing. Because if you kind of think, hey, I solved this thing, you're going to probably take a step back. So a lot of it is going to hinge, as it always does, on the quarterback. But right now, if we're going off last season, the Packers were going straight up and the Eagles were going straight down. I'd have a lot of concern with that week 1 game.
Yeah, I think the one thing too about Jordan Love is that guy can thread the needle in a tight window. He is a great thrower of the football. What do you think of Matt LaFleur, their head coach down there in Green Bay?
I didn't like Matt LaFleur for a lot of years, and I've had to rethink that. And part of it is
he's won a lot of games, John.
I know. Well, part of it is you and I could have won games with Aaron Rodgers.
I know that's the big question with this comment, with this evaluation of him as a coach.
But now you saw it again in what he was able to do last year. So I kind of changed, and I did my mea culpas on Birds 365 because, look, anybody who knows this show knows how much respect I have for Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. And I don't give a shit whether you like him or like his politics. Just stop with that nonsense. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever live. Nobody's played the position at a higher level. When he's at his height, anybody could win with Aaron Rodgers at his height. And I not blame, but I put that into the context. Like, all right, he won a lot of games, but anybody would have won a lot of games under that circumstance. to take Jordan Love in his first year as a starter, have that run at the end of last season, you got to give him a lot of credit for that.
I think Slager brings up a good point. Just following up, it's really your point, but Slager does comment on it. Good point, John. In the same way the Eagles had too much pressure on them last year, I think there's a possibility that Love will be impacted by the higher expectations. I mean, you're 100% right, Slager. That's what Johnny Mack was saying. I mean, if you go and I've read a little bit of Packers blogs and stuff this morning. They're pretty high on this football team. They are remembering that thrashing of the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs, which they should. I mean, I would, if I was a Packer fan and we got a new quarterback in here coming out of the Aaron Rodgers era, I'd be pretty pumped with a thrashing over the Cowboys like they did because they really destroyed that team. But you're right. I mean, they might have expectations that are making things harder to live with. Bigger expectations mean you have to do better and be more, and it's tougher to live with when you have those, especially when you're a young quarterback. And as Johnny Mack pointed out, they will shift. They will adjust to Jordan Love and playing him. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. John, before I move on to the Falcons, I know we already did our win-loss thing. You think this is a loss for the Eagles?
Green Bay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had it as a loss. Right off that, not saying they can't win the game, but I do think the Packers, kind of had the momentum coming off of last season. The Eagles didn't. The Eagles have all the change. I think there's going to be some growing pains when it comes to the Kellen Moore offense. Don't be surprised with that. I think you've already seen it in minicamp. I think that'll continue until early in the regular season. So I think, the Packers are probably better equipped to hit the ground running with a little bit more continuity. And, they have a lot of talent too. I don't think they're, maybe not as well known as some of the Eagles star, as I said, but if anything, they have more playmakers that can make plays because they're so deep at wide receiver. They're deeper at tight end. As I said, I don't love the running back move because I'm a big Aaron Jones guy. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say Josh Jacobs is a bad running back. He had a bad year, but for all the Eagles fans that get on me about Saquon Barkley, well, then you can't point to Josh Jacobs' bad year and say he's terrible because you got that guy in the Hall of Fame, a lot of them, Saquon. So, Josh Jacobs has proven.
You are right there. Those stats last year are a little bit concerning, and just the sheer amount of touches, that's a
yeah. I don't like it. I don't like the move, and mainly, like I said, Aaron Jones was just unbelievable in that Cowboys game. And he is the best receiving back in football, not named Christian McCaffrey. That's the guy who's number 2 as a receiving back. But he's getting older and he's got a lot of injury history. So I get it from that standpoint. But he was really difficult to deal with because he could catch the football down the field. And that made him even more difficult to deal with.
They're coming in. They didn't lose any coordinators or anything, right? Last year, the Packers. I don't think they did. I don't know though. I can double check.
Matt LaFleur is the offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
so
he's right.
It doesn't count. Adam Stenavich is.
Yeah, I'm more meant for just the continuity aspect. Just because I think the Eagles are a better team than the Packers.
They changed their defensive coordinator. They went with, and I'm trying to look at. They went with a college guy, which was kind of weird, kind of a weird hire from Boston College as the head coach at Boston College. I forget his name. I'm trying to look it up. Jeff Hapley. So that was kind of weird. They were, they had a really bad linebacker situation. Not that. Not that they're the only team. We obviously see it with the Eagles as well. A lot of teams just don't invest in linebacker. the ironic thing is they've invested. Quay Walker, as I mentioned, was a former first-round pick, not former. I got to stick in the swear chart. I I screwed up my own pet peeve, is Zander. 2022 first-round pick, Quay Walker, hasn't really lived up to the billing. And they drafted Cooper this year, Edgerrin Cooper. So, but they, again, when I talk about those guys in theory have a bigger upside than the Eagles linebackers. So even though they haven't proven it, but yeah, Jeff Hapley is the defensive coordinator, and that's kind of a weird hire, to be honest. So that I'm glad you brought that up, because that might hurt the Packers at least early in the season.
Yeah, well, because that's the one evaluation I would give for the Packers offense, is that they have continuity now coming into the year versus Jalen is, as he mentioned, 95% new. There's a whole, and I think there's going to be a growing pains, not crazy, but I think there's going to be some growing pains, with the start of the season for the Eagles. So we'll see. We'll see.
And Joe Barry was the old defensive coordinator, and he was running a Fangio-like scheme as well, like so many people, and he was not successful with it. So, they probably kept him a little bit too long, but yeah, I would have went in a different direction than Jeff Hapley. So I think that might help the Eagles.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Falcons before I do that. Richard Natinsky checking in from Wildwood. Wildwood days. I love that. I love that spot we play on the channel. So shout out to you for being here from Wildwood, and shout out to Wildwoods, a great sponsor of the show. Thank you to the Wildwoods for sponsoring here on Birds 365, and shout out to you, Richard, for being here this morning. We appreciate that. Johnny Mac, game 2, Atlanta Falcons. I think this is a sleeper game. This is a tougher opponent than I think people are giving credit for. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. He throws the ball well. They got a lot of young. Speaking of pass catchers, speaking of young playmakers, speaking of skill position guys, they got a lot of them. They got Kyle Pitts. They got some good receivers. They have, Bijan Robinson from Once Upon a Time. This was Bijan 365. What do you think of the Falcons? How are you viewing this game going into the year?
A lot of it depends on Kirk and where he is health-wise. I know he's down at tight end university. He's jacked up. I know he's in good shape. I don't know if
he recovered from that injury, Kirk.
Well, he's out there helping the tight ends. So, and he was working in mini camp. So he's close to being cleared if he's not completely cleared for contact. But he is 36 years old or whatever, coming off an Achilles. So there's got to be some concern about what he's going to be from a health perspective. Eagles fans should know. He has gouged the Eagles from a passing perspective multiple times now. The Eagles usually beat them as well. So, who cares if you throw for 400? But that might be one of those games where people are, the Eagles win the game, but people are shaking their heads because the Falcons got 350, 375 passing yards, 3-4 touchdowns, and the Eagles win the game because they score more. But yeah, they're going to be, if Kirk is healthy, they're going to be explosive offensively. You can argue their backup running back, Tyler Algier, was probably more effective than Bijan, at least as a runner. But,
that's a good player, that Tyler Algier. I like that kid. He's a good player.
And they still have
college. What did he play? BYU. He played BYU.
BYU, yeah. And obviously Bijan is very talented, very gifted. Kyle Pitts, very gifted. Hasn't lived up to what people expected, but now that he has a high volume thrower, who knows? And Drake London,
Ray McLeod too. They got Ray. Don't they have Ray McLeod now? And
yeah, they have Ray, but Drake London's probably their wide receiver one.
Yeah, definitely. I think
will be, and he'll be better.
Added that could make an impact. Where did Ray play? Before there was Pittsburgh and San Francisco. Yeah, Pittsburgh and San Francisco. So I think he's going to have a bigger role, or at least the opportunity.
Well, they signed Darnell Mooney. They gave him a bunch of money to be the number 2 receiver. And they traded for Rondell Moore from the Cardinals, who's explosive as well. So they have a good slot receiver in theory. They're another team that you say, whoa, they got a lot of skill position talent. And the offensive line is better than it has been. Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry developed into really good players. Yeah, they have everything to be successful offensively. I think the issue with them is going to be defense. They've struggled with the pass rush for a number of years. I think that continues. There's no obvious, oh, that guy's going to be a splashy pass rusher. So I think they're going to struggle defensively. They're going to have to outscore people. And I think they'll be capable of it, but they're going to give up some points as well.
Yeah, they're one of those teams, in my opinion, where it's like, I don't think they're a better team than the Eagles at all, but it's like an any given Sunday type of thing. They're a team. They got talent. They have a quarterback. I bet you, John, those receivers down in Atlanta are licking their chops because look at what kind of money Justin Jefferson just signed for. Now, Justin Jefferson's a great player, but you're only as good as the vehicle getting you the football, and Kirk Cousins can get the football out with the best of them. So I think those receivers, Drake London down there, Ray, we talked about Ray, even Kyle Pitts, I bet you they are all licking their chops to get that ball, trying to have a big breakout year. So I think the Falcons are a sleeper team. Their roster is not nearly as good as the Eagles, I don't think, but I think they are a team that could, any given Sunday.
They got a boatload of first-round picks on offense. So if you go the Eagles pedigree scouting way, Drake London's a first-round pick, Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, Kyle Pitts, Bijan, all first-round picks. Yeah, they got a lot of talent on offense. We'll see how it shakes out. But if the quarterback isn't healthy, and that's a serious injury at his age, so we have to see how that shakes out. And they drafted a quarterback in the top 10, which may have been the goofiest decision ever, but there you have it.
I for the life of me, like, I know it's been beaten to a pulp by all the national media since the draft. Why the heck do you do that? You signed Kirk. I mean, you have a chance to compete this year. Go and get a player. If they pick it, I mean, really, I don't even think it was a good first round. It'd be one thing if they drafted a guy I thought was going to be great. Like
if they get it right and he turns into a long-term starter, that's all that matters. But yeah, they overdrafted him.
That means you made a dumb decision in Kirk. So one way or the other, it was a dumb decision. That cemented one of the decisions is going to be dumb no matter what. So it's an interesting move.
Yeah, interesting to say the least.
I guess they're trying to Jordan Love him a little bit, right? Put him on the bench for a few years.
Yeah, they're going to put him on the bench, and hopefully if he develops down. But I think they overdraft him. And if you want to do that, trade down, do something else, get something, manipulate the board, do your job as a GM.
We can't relate to that here in Philadelphia because we have Howie Roseman. I mean, Howie Roseman doesn't get burnt like that. I mean, he might pick a wrong player. People will
say that. I mean, it's easy to say, well, if he develops into a long-term starter, as I just did. But even in that, even if that's the best case scenario, you still overdrafted the kid. You didn't have to draft him there. Yeah, so you didn't get the valuation out of the spot. And I think nobody's going to disagree with that sentiment.
Yep. So we'll see. John, game 3, which is an interesting one, the New Orleans Saints. This is where I'm a little different with you. You like this team. I think they have good talent. I just don't like.
Well, I'll tell you why. And I'm not. They're the exact opposite of Atlanta. Atlanta's got all the skill position, all the splashy guys, and everybody thinks they're good because of their offense, and they don't have a defense. The Saints have a defense, one of the few teams in the NFL where you can say, all right, they're going to be pretty good defensively. Everybody else is sort of like, I use that baseball relievers. You may have a good year, you may have a bad year. It's the Eagles. They had a good year in 2022. They had a bad year in 2023 on defense. There are very few consistent defenses from week to week in this league. Baltimore probably being the most notable. The Saints are good on defense. They're good. I don't know what they're going to do on offense. I don't love Derek Carr. They're fighting with Alvin Kamara, who's a declining player anyway. Chris Olave is a good player, but they don't have much other than that. The offensive line's just okay. They're not going to scare anybody offensively when it's an offensive driven era, so people think they're bad. But they're going to win games because they can stop people. Their secondary is in the conversation for being the best in football. Their linebackers, I talk about Demario Davis all the time. He's getting older, but man, he's an old school, beat you up, tough. Bobby King would love that guy. I'm sure he does love him. Willie Gaze, their other linebacker, who's a playmaker. Pete Werner's a good linebacker. They got linebackers coming up the Yahoo for an organization that we have to follow, the Eagles, that doesn't give a rat's ass about linebackers. And then, their defensive front with Cam Jordan is also a little bit aging, but keeps playing at a high level. They're just really good defense.
Who's their defensive coordinator?
Well, Dennis Allen's a defensive head coach,
yeah, right.
So he's pretty much running it. But Joe Woods is their defensive coordinator. So it's one of those things where it's really
it's one
Dennis
of those games. If they have the advantage and they can slow our offense down, which you are right. I mean, that's a good defense. They got a lot of players there. That could potentially be a game that I guess gets close if they're able to slow down the Eagles' offense. But I just don't see them being able to hang with us for a full four quarters. So we'll see how it goes. Johnny Mac, before we move into the Bucs and then finish up Saints, I want to go to D-Love, a super chat. D-Love, thanks, brother. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate the super chat. Anybody that has questions for John, I'm going to answer them. Super chats go to the front. So thank you guys. And thank you, D-Love, for the super chat. He says, does someone like Tyler Hall make the roster, considering he is their only pure slot corner besides Maddox? Maybe Cooper, you can say, but he's a rookie. It's a good point. I mean, they don't really have a pure slot corner. I just don't think Tyler makes it because of the amount of bodies in the room. John, what say you?
Yeah, I think he's an under. I wouldn't say he's going to make the team, but I wouldn't dismiss him for that reason. He's a natural slot corner. Avante's history. I don't think Avante's versatility and the ability to also play backup safety, I think, helps Howie keep an extra cornerback on the roster. So it might come down to Eli Ricks or Tyler Hall. And if it comes down to that, how much do they really, really like the long-term ability of Eli Ricks versus having that comfort level in the slot after what they went through last season? Maybe that changes their philosophy. Because last year they kept Eli Ricks because they thought he could be a long-term starter at outside corner, and that's just more important. But now they have Ringo and Mitchell and DeJean, and even Isaiah Rodgers, all these guys. And then you bring up, pinch comes to shove, yes, Cooper DeJean is not a natural slot corner, but they think he can play the position. Isaiah Rodgers is playing outside, but they think he can play inside if they need him. Even Quinyon Mitchell. So they have a bunch of guys this year they feel more comfortable in a pinch moving inside than they did last year. That, to me, hurts Tyler a little bit. But I wouldn't sleep on him making the team. I think he's a legitimate candidate to be on the 53. So I wouldn't dismiss him, but I wouldn't say he's a lock by any stretch either.
Yeah, great question there by D-Love. Somebody that's kind of getting slept on, and he looked pretty good as well in spring football, didn't he, Johnny?
Yeah, he did. Just, got overshadowed by the bigger names, but he played well and I try to throw him in that conversation of the corners that played well. And this is all dependent on James Bradbury leaving as well, because if James is here, which I don't think he will be, but if he is here, that's going to really hurt some of those guys on the bubble.
D-Love, thank you for the super chat, man. That was a great question. Johnny Mac, I thought gave you a great answer. So we'll see what happens with Tyler Hall. Let's go to one more super chat here from James Carver. That's right, Zach McPherson. Johnny Mac, Zach McPherson. He did an interview, or Zach, I guess I always call him Zach because it's Z-E,
Yeah.
but Zach, whatever.
It is Zach, but it's spelled Zach.
Yeah, it's spelled Zach. So I call him Zach. He's Zach in my eyes. I'm Zander. He's Zach. All right. People overlook the fact that McPherson played slot a ton at Tech and loves to hit. His interview the other day with Mott, yeah, he was on with Thomas Mott, Johnny Mac, even said he's working to play slot in 24. Yeah, we'll see. I don't think it looks good for Zach or Zach. I think it's
no, nice guy too.
Great guy. I just think that there's too many bodies, right? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
numbers game, and I just don't see it. I don't see him. I don't see the spot for him on the roster.
Yeah, it's a shame last year because I think it all started. I think week 2 of Avante Maddox got hurt, tore his pec, but it all started in the preseason because Zach was going to be the backup slot corner. And he tore his Achilles against Baltimore in the preseason, and the revolving door started, and the Eagles just couldn't close it, and had all the issues. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, since that time, you have all these additions, and they're pretty high profile additions. If you think about, a first round pick, a second round pick, Isaiah Rodgers has got starting experience in Indianapolis coming back from his gambling suspension. Tyler Hall is a free agent even. You have all these meaningful additions, and, Zach still wasn't cleared to participate fully in the minicamp and the OTAs. So it's a large hill to climb, to put it mildly. I do think he's an NFL player, though, and I think he's one of those guys who, who knows? He might be back on the practice squad. Now you can put veterans on the practice squad, but for the 53, very unlikely, I would say, unfortunately. Good kid, great guy. Disappointing injury timing. He was going to get a shot to be, a meaningful backup last year, and he got hurt. Sucks.
Yeah, we'll see how it is. James Carver, thanks for checking in, brother. We appreciate it. He clarified. I just think Zach makes it before Hall was my point. Sadly, I think he's going to another team. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, a lot of bodies like that. This is the reality of the NFL. Sometimes, I mean, on one hand, we're all excited about all the young talent on the team. On the other hand, you're going to lose some guys. I mean, you just can't keep them all. There's just not spots for them all, and they're valuable pieces. And Howie will probably shake and bake, maybe move some of them, or they just won't make the roster, and they'll get cut and get picked up on waivers, or make a practice squad somewhere else. It's just the nature of the NFL. So thanks for those 2 great questions from Carver and from D-Love. We appreciate both of you guys. Appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you guys drop a like the show. And then one more programming reminder coming up in 22 minutes. Big Sills at 10 a.m. Big Sills, everybody. Get ready for Big Sills coming right out of Birds 365. He will have a shortened show today, just 2 hours. So 10 a.m. to 12 if you're in the Eastern time zone. 10 a.m. to 12. Big Sills will be on coming right out of Birds 365. So we will do that. Sorry, that is my fault. I have a wedding to attend later today for my first cousin. So a big day in the family. And then I will be out there. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow. Johnny Mac, I'm going to be on the show tomorrow morning. I'm going to be seeing 3 of you. It's like the Rocky movie. Hit the one in the middle, right?
Yeah.
I'll be talking to the one in the middle, but I'll be back in the morning, hopefully in good shape for Friday's edition of Birds 365. Johnny Mac, let's move into it. I thought we gave a pretty good breakdown of the Saints. So they're going to be a good team. They got a good defense. We will see how that goes. But let's move into the final game before the bye week. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bad blood in the mouth of Philadelphia after that thrashing in the playoffs. They've now thrashed us twice in the playoffs in the last 3 years. One with Tom Brady, one with Baker Mayfield. What do you make of this game?
Yeah, the Eagles should be used to going to Tampa by now, but I don't know how they lost to that team last year. So I would hope that there would be some kind of revenge factor to want to prove they have more talent than Tampa. But But I mean, they got waxed. They weren't even close, which tells you how bad things went off the rails last year. I'm not particularly in love with the Tampa Bay offense. The quarterback is somewhat limited. They don't have an explosive running back in Rashad White. The receivers, even though they were making plays, I mean, Mike Evans he's going to Hall of Fame, but he's getting older. They're letting Trey Palmer make trades. I know they brought in Sterling Shepard. The offensive line, Tristan Wirfs, a very good player, but other than that, they did get Graham Barton, who's going to be their new starting center, I would think, day one. I'm very high on him. I think he's going to be a really good player. Vita Vea been tremendous, maybe the best pure run stuffer in the NFL. Antoine Winfield Jr., one of my favorite players, maybe the best safety in the NFL. So, but the Eagles should beat that team. They should have beat that team last year. They should beat that team again. They did beat that team. Remember how badly they beat them early in the season in Tampa. And when they went back, they were so shot mentally and emotionally. They didn't show up. It was an embarrassing defeat. But they're a better team than Tampa Bay, and they should prove it. But if you're not playing with confidence, things can go. You saw it last year. Things can go drastically wrong because everybody can beat you in this league. I say it all the time.
Yeah, it's good players all over the league. Yep.
Yeah, but I'm not tremendously high on Tampa Bay. I think they got some issues, and just emphasizes how disappointing that playoff loss was last year because they, going into that game, I was like, they're not going to lose to that team, even on the road. And they didn't. They not only lost, they got their what's handed to them.
Yeah, it looked really bad. I've said many times on the National Football Show with Dan Sileo coming up at 10 o'clock this morning, special edition of his show. But I've said many times on there, that game had the opportunity for me as a fan of the team to completely wipe out the slide at the end of the year, right? You go into the playoffs, it's a new life. You're 0-0 again. You're undefeated. Go into the playoffs, win a game versus Tampa. Like, I thought they got the good first round matchup. They got the matchup they wanted to get. And they just looked like a limp dog out there. They just had no fight. There was no will to win. They just looked terrible. I thought Jalen looked terrible. It was really embarrassing, as Bruce puts it in the chat. It really was an embarrassing loss. And that, to me, cemented why, it cemented this offseason of talk that we've had, just trying to rehash what the hell happened to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2023. I thought they could have corrected the narrative pretty easily by just winning a playoff game and looking like they cared, and they didn't.
Sua's down there. Maybe that turns to Sua Opeta signed with Tampa Bay. And, of course, the Eagles have Devin White, so maybe there's a big revenge factor for Devin White.
Is Sua ascending like the Tesla stock that Jason Kelsey called him out?
No. He is firmly entrenched as a backup. But, he's a good backup. No problems with that. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the quarterback and the running back. And NFL wise, obviously Baker Mayfield can make some plays and be. And again, we're talking about this. This is not college. These are NFL teams. So you're going to have to deal with good players, and you're going to have to deal with the Antoine Winfield Juniors and the Vita Veas and be able to win. But if you're looking for a consistent team, I don't think Tampa Bay can be that at this stage. But yeah, that was a disappointing loss. And I don't know who called it embarrassing, but an Eagles exec did you one better, because in the third quarter, he said, fucking embarrassing, after the 77th missed tackle, I think, of the game.
It really was. It was, geez, I don't even want to think about it anymore. But Lou hits the nail on the head for me. This was exactly how I felt about the game. it was as if they were just trying to get to the offseason. They just quit. It's really what it looked like. And I said to you, Johnny, a couple weeks ago, I sit in here in my studio. I got a little studio here. I have a TV up on the wall there. I keep on NFL Network for the most part in the offseason just because I'm not. I like other sport. I'm a big hockey guy, but other than that, I mean, I like baseball as well. I like the Phillies and stuff. But I watch NFL Network in the offseason. I love all things football. And they replayed that game, and I sat here. I sat right there after this show one day, and I didn't move. I rewatched the game like it was just on, and it re-angered me. I was like, it looks as bad as I remembered it
when I
looking.
was going to Tampa, I say all the time, I was laughing at people that said Nick Sirianni was going to lose his job, and I was saying, come on, stop it. And coming back, I was like, well, maybe. That's how bad it was.
Bad, man. It really looked bad. Dad says he turned it off. Only 2 games I turned it off were both Tampa games. That, and I imagine the Tom Brady playoff game where that was Jalen's first playoff game. He did not look good in that game. Bruce says, I was at the bar ready to throw hands for the Eagles. I'm with you, Bruce. That was an ugly, ugly game. But anyway, John, that's your first 4 games for the Eagles in 2024.
First quarter.
First quarter, right? First quarter of the season before the bye week. They got the early
Can't
bye
say
week.
that anymore, though, because they made it 17 games. Thanks, NFL.
Yeah, right. It used to be a perfect quarter. Now it's about 23% or 22% or whatever it is right in there. I don't have the math on the top of my head. Yeah, Lou, he says I never want to rewatch it. Lou, I do not recommend rewatching that game. It was brutal the first time and brutal, even more brutal potentially the second time. But John, and everybody in the chat, I'd like you to chime in on this as well. But I want John to be the voice of reason as we are all fans here. What's a realistic record to be through those 4 games without being like, holy shit, time to sound the alarms type of, if they're 1-3, I think you're going to be at sound the alarms.
Yeah.
What do you think it's realistic?
I think 3-1 is good. 4-0 was obviously a home run. Then you're starting to think, all right, Eagles are back. 3-1, I think, is perfectly fine. 2-2, I think, is understandable. 1-3 is, sound the alarms. Obviously, 0-4. They're not going to go 0-4, but 0-4 would be, fire the head coach right away type of thing.
Yeah, I think.
Which I don't think Jeffrey would do either. But those are kind of the levels. I expect him. I expect some struggles early in the season. I think they're going to not be as good as people expect early and be, starting to hit their stride late. And I think I had them at 2-2 through the first 4 games, which I don't think would be great, but it's not the end of the world because I do think there's going to be some struggles. Learning Kellen Moore's offense and getting everybody on the same page and getting everything up to speed. Plus all the young defensive backs, a lot of change on the defensive side as well. Not from a scheme perspective, but from a talent perspective. And I think they're going to be better in the second half of the season than the first half of the season.
Yep, me as well. So we'll see how it all plays out. Johnny Mac, let's go to our final commercial break. We only have I'm going to go to 57 or 58 today on the show, 9:58. So we'll end a couple minutes early just because I got to get ready to get Dan up right at 10 a.m. I got a busy day, so I got to move this stuff along so I can try and make myself look somewhat presentable for the wedding this afternoon for my cousin. Obviously a weird time for a wedding. Don't ask me. I didn't plan it. I didn't book it. I just got invited and I have to be there. So I'm a part of it. So let's get to our commercial break. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. Pretty good viewership on this Thursday, June 20th edition. We appreciate you all being here watching us in the off season. Just 30 something days. I think it's 34 or 33 until the Eagles report for camp. And then I know it's 78 days until the Eagles are on the field in Sao Paulo, Brazil. 77 days until the NFL kicks off that Thursday night with that good Thursday night game. So it's coming, Eagle fans. It's coming, and it will be here before we know it. So, boy, am I excited for it. I think Johnny Mac's even getting excited for all this off-season talk. One more super chat before I hit the break. Johnny Mac with OTAs, 95%, et cetera. Have you reevaluated your stance on the early bye after 4 games?
No, I never like an early bye. I mean, that's I don't. early buys are not good in general. I
I do
mean, you're
think
going to get
there is.
banged up, and it's just better to have it later. Always for every team.
Yeah,
That to me is static.
I think the negatives of it outweigh the positives, but I do think there is a silver lining in that you do have the coordinators, and it might be a week for them to, assess
Yeah,
what's
but
going on. Yeah,
and Nick has talked from that standpoint because there's self scouting. Typically in a bye week, the sample size isn't large enough to do anything meaningful from a self scouting standpoint.
yeah, true.
So I don't like early buys for any team in any city at any time. And I think everybody's on board with that same sentiment. Nobody would like an early buy.
Agreed. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll have about a couple minutes left to play on Birds 365 when we get back, and then Dan Cilio coming up at 10 a.m. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Stay tuned. Birds 365 will be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's Birds 365, June 20th, moving right along in the offseason. Very excited to get to this next stage of minicamp, or not minicamps in the rear view now. Training camp coming up in July, so good stuff. Coming up in the next couple of weeks of Birds 365, loyal viewers, we appreciate all of you for being here. Last couple thoughts today, Johnny Mac. I thought we had some good topics today. We talked about Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, which are two exciting young guys in that back end. Johnny Stolness brought some good perspective to the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni debate. And I think we can finally put that to bed. What say you, Johnny Mac? At least for now.
Yeah, I don't think it's getting put to bed. We can put it to bed. I'm sick of talking about it. Just but I do think the fans that blame the media. I mean, you also, as I said, you can't stick your head in the ground either. This is not. It's an unforced error, unnecessary speculation created by the quarterback himself. I'm not going to lie to you. I always say that. That's where we are. Not important from the standpoint of, his play on the field will determine wins and losses. But, from a standpoint of higher ups being disappointed, why wouldn't they be disappointed is what I continue with. If you're being honest with yourself, why wouldn't you be disappointed? Because it was easy. As John pointed out, John Stolness, hey, he's doing a great job. Next question. All you had to do.
Yeah, it would have been very easy. I want to go to Amber's question because Amber's been in the chat. Amber, I did see it. Sorry I didn't address it. I just didn't think there was a moment in the show to bring it up. But Amber's been asking why Jalen hasn't been going back to Tom House. You remember after his first year starting, he went out to LA and he worked with the quarterback coach. And, that was when he made the big jump forward the next year after that. Have you heard of Jalen doing anything like that? But Amber, I will say before I let Johnny Mac answer this, he has been working with his receivers. I saw you reference that earlier. He's been, even yesterday, the picture came out. He was working with Saquon Barkley. I think Jalen does a lot with his receivers in the offseason, so I don't want to not give him credit for that. But Johnny Mac, do you know if he's done anything?
By the way, it's Adam. Adam Deju is the major guy. It's still Tom's. Tom started it, but Tom's like 70.
Yeah, he's older.
8 years old.
Really old. Yeah.
So Adam, he goes out. He went out there, and he goes out there usually for a week. So I think it was over. Now last year, I think was a bigger issue because coming off the Super Bowl, the short season, and I still think he went out there for a short period. It's not a bowl off season. I don't know if that's what people think. He still spends the majority of his time. But he did go out and when he took off, Tom House and Adam Deju, I always screw up his name. I don't know how you pronounce Adam's name. Such a weird name, but he's a former pitcher with the Dodgers as well. His mechanics improved and he still works with those guys. So that part has been a pretty consistent process. The issue, Carson did the same thing when his mechanics got better and then he stopped going. That has not been the case with Jalen. But again, we're talking about a short period, 1 to 2 weeks. It's not a big all-encompassing off-season thing. It never has.
Do we know if he did it this season, or are you just assuming he did?
He did go out to California, which is code of
right, going there, yeah, because that's where it is. And Hurts is obviously not a Cali kid; he grew up in Texas.
Yeah. That's his code for saying yes, he was out there.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Birds 365. For the first time in a while, I'm saying we have content coming right out of 365. So if you're on the channel, stay tuned. Dan Cilio will be right up next on the channel. Let me make sure everybody gets redirected into the National Football Show. So he'll be 10 to 12 today, which is not a Dan Cilio thing. This is my thing. I have some personal responsibilities and things to attend to. So we'll have a 10 to 12 edition of the National Football Show coming up next. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Johnny Mac, great show today. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Hopefully, I won't be seeing 3 of you.
All right. Enjoy. Yeah, I don't want that for you. Enjoy the wedding, Zander, and everybody have a good day.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Make sure you guys hit the like on your way out. We appreciate it. Stay tuned. National Football Show coming up next.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.